Good day, everyone. You're welcome to the IPS 55 on Statistics, Education and Practice in Developing Countries, Experiences, Challenges, and Opportunities. My name is Olawale Awe. I am the LISA 2020 Ambassador to Africa, and I am the first LISA Fellow. I am an Assistant Professor of Statistics at Anchor University, Lagos. Today, we have two speakers in this session, and they're going to be talking to us about two very important topics. Our first speaker is Dr. Eric Vance. Dr. Eric Vance is the Global Director of the LISA 2020 Network, which has established 28 statistical laboratories in 10 developing countries of the world. Dr. Vance will discuss with us the inspiration and context of the LISA 2020 Global Network, including the historical perspective for understanding current barriers and challenges of the network. He will also discuss what is needed to shape the next generation of data scientists to be adept in their technical skills, along with the ability to apply statistics to real-world challenges through the development of collaboration and communication skills. Our next speaker today will be Dr. Kim Love. Dr. Kim Love is the Performance Monitoring Specialist for the LISA 2020 Global Network. She will discuss the general approach the network has taken so far in monitoring and evaluating its efforts towards transforming evidence into action with respect to capacity building and development. She will also provide the network's most recent performance metrics and share the perspective of some of the LISA 2020 Global Network's members on the specific data science related challenges and opportunities facing their labs in their respective countries. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to this session again. I want to believe that you enjoy the session. Happy listening.
Thank you for attending this session. I am Professor Eric Vance, and I will be talking about experiences, challenges, and opportunities in building capacity in statistics education and practice. And this is related to the story of LISA 2020. So I'm Professor Eric Vance from the Department of Applied Mathematics at the University of Colorado Boulder in the USA. And I'm also the director of LISA and the global director of the LISA 2020 network. So today, just as a kind of a quick intro, I've traveled around the world 3 times. I have traveled through 85 countries, and I have learned, perhaps paradoxically, 2 big lessons from those travels. The first is that people are basically the same. And the photos here are not really about people, but they are from a selection of countries around the world. So, what my experiences were with folks in Nepal while trekking to Mount Everest, were similar to my experiences in Peru, trekking to Machu Picchu. People have the same hopes, dreams, desires, are very, very similar all around the world. And, people are basically the same. The second lesson that I learned by traveling all around the world, various countries, that people and cultures are actually very different. And, as a visitor to many countries, I just scratched the surface of what was really going on. And, to really understand a people and a culture, you could visit many times, you could live there for a long time, and you still might not ever achieve the true understanding. You probably have to be born there and live it. So people and cultures are very different, and what's common in Ethiopia is going to be very different from what is common practice in Australia. So these two contradictory facts or lessons learned from my travels have really helped me think about how I approach statistics and in building statistics capacity. So I think that there are really two main challenges in statistics education and practice. There's knowing and doing. So knowing like what to teach, what topics should my students learn, that's a challenge. And then how to teach those topics effectively. That's the doing. That's also a challenge. And when I think about statistics education, I really think about two categories. There are technical skills, and then there are collaboration skills. And both are very important. I think both are necessary. Both really define what it means to be a statistician. Statisticians collaborate with other fields in a way much more than any other field. So in terms of this knowing and doing, there are many things have occurred. There are many people who have tried to overcome the challenges and have figured out what to teach, how to teach it effectively. And so a couple ways that are very common in developing countries are for academics to go abroad and to fly in experts from international, so fly them in from abroad. So in terms of going abroad, that's maybe a goal for many young academics. They want to go abroad, become exposed. They want to apprentice internationally. They want to learn from folks in other countries and then return with best practices. And I would say that this is it's a common practice, and it's not necessarily bad practice, but it's not a great practice. I don't think we've seen results from this style of go abroad and learn from the international experts abroad. And likewise, the idea of flying in experts to teach specific topics. So what's the common paradigm is let's rely on international experts. The international people know best. We hear advice from the consultants who are not part of our group. We can have really great professors fly in, give a week-long short course, and then fly out. And everybody has great intentions. The materials for these fly-in, fly-out courses are excellent. The students are motivated. The students say that the international expert was like really great, and yet it doesn't really build capacity. And I think a reason why is that these outside experts are not understanding the local context of the students and the faculty and staff, in the local area where they came into. And learnings from abroad are not necessarily transferable. So, another reason why this fly-in, fly-out model, I don't think is what we should be aspiring to in the future, is that there's not a lot of continuity. So for that 1 week that the expert is there, everything is great. But then once he or she leaves, everybody is left on their own. And as anybody who has ever tried to learn programming, specifically like learning R programming, you're going to come to problems. You're going to come to barriers. And it's really great if you can have that expert, in the hallway, down the hall, in an office down the hall, to ask them questions. Or if it's another colleague of yours sitting next to you in an office, you can ask them for advice. There always is the internet, and that's how we really get by without having experts, immediately available to help us overcome the challenges. But when the fly in, fly out, those experts don't necessarily respond to emails, and there's not a lot of continuity. So, these solutions, going abroad and flying in experts, I would call them the failed solutions. These are sort of the old paradigm, and I'm proposing a little bit newer of a paradigm. So I am thinking that both of these activities are great. Like, they do have good potential, because learning at a foreign institution is really beneficial. It's really great to see how different people do things. That's one of the things, I learned traveling, is there are very many commonalities and there are differences, and you can learn just as much from the commonalities between places as you can from the differences. So outside experts, they do have great advice. And really, the way to make all of this work is that you need to make this expert advice your own, right? So if there is an international expert flying in for the week, they really should collaborate with a local faculty or staff member for teaching. To help them adjust their lectures to the local audience. And just as the way that learning occurs for our students is, we tell them things as expert statistical educators, but they have to make it their own. They have to create that knowledge within their head to be able to actually learn and understand the things that we're talking about. And so I'm not really talking about anything new. I'm just really re-emphasizing that when you do have an opportunity to go abroad and become apprenticed internationally, or if an international expert comes to a developing country, you want to listen, learn, and then adapt it to your own context. And that is true for technical skills and statistics. It's also true for collaboration skills. So specifically talking about collaboration skills, if we have the two questions, like what to teach and how to teach it effectively, I have been running LISA for 13 years, and I have, supervised more than 10,000 projects and short courses and walk-in consultations. And from all of that, I've distilled what I think are the 5 most important aspects of collaboration to teach. And these are encapsulated by the ASCCR framework, the ASCCR framework. So the ASCCR frame is the 5 aspects are attitude, structure, content, communication, and relationship. And I think these are the commonalities between all collaborations, all statistics and data science collaborations in every context. So in terms of the attitudes, there are also some common attitudes that, as statisticians, we want to have an attitude of being helpful to the domain expert. We want to have the attitude of a growth mindset, where even if we don't know the statistics answers right off the bat, we are able to use those questions to improve our own statistical ability and then give good answers to the domain experts. Another attitude is to be a really good listener. This is going to be true in all contexts. We want to really listen to the domain expert. And I have talked about the fundamental law of statistical collaboration, which is seek first to understand, then to be understood. So we want to understand the domain and the domain problem, and then do some statistics, and then come up with a solution and have that solution be understood and implemented. Another common attitude is that as collaborative statisticians, we don't want to just answer a statistics question. We want to help answer that research question or help that business person make a decision, help that policymaker implement or create and implement a really good policy. So those are some common attitudes across all countries, all situations, and all collaborations. And then there are specific attitudes that might be specific to your institution, to your country. And that's why I suggest that you learn the ASCCR frame and then adapt it to your local context. So for example, for structure, I teach the power structure, which is a way for us to structure meetings that we have with domain experts. We prepare for the meeting, we open the meeting, then we work, and then we end the meeting, and then we reflect on how well that worked. And now that structure itself is applicable everywhere. What could be different is in the opening, how much of a focus do you have on having a time conversation, for example, how to figure out how much time both you and the domain expert have for a specific, for a certain meeting. So the way that you would do that might differ in different cultures based on how different cultures view time and view the hierarchy and whose time is more important. In my culture, I consider both of our times equally important. My time is just as important as whoever is sitting across from me, whether that person is a undergraduate student or a faculty member, or even the vice chancellor or provost of the university. In our, my colleague and I, Heather Smith, we wrote a paper about the ASCCR frame, and there's a link here. So in that, we give more details about the ASCCR frame, but not all of the details because there's too many to put in one paper. And so the basic idea really is that if you want to learn what to teach in terms of collaboration skills, what are important, you read this paper, you find out these 5 categories that of attitude, structure, content, communication, and relationship, and then you adapt it to your local context. You figure out, which of the communication strategies are best for your local context. What are some other communication strategies that I have not talked about in that paper, but that you know about from your own experience? You can use that to also learn, what to teach to your students about collaboration skills. So, how to teach collaboration skills effectively? I'm not going to go into detail on this. I have not yet written that paper. That will be in a couple of years. But the way that I teach is with 5 major steps: preparation, practice, doing, reflecting, and mentoring. So my students, they first read some papers or drafts of papers that I've written about collaboration, specifically about attitude, structure, content, communication, and relationship. They also observe some meetings, some collaboration meetings. And then that's part of their preparation. And then they practice. And they practice in the classroom in a controlled environment, surrounded by their peers. We do role plays, we practice having conversations, and that's the second step. The third step then is that they actually do collaboration. They collaborate with domain experts. They will meet with another statistician and a domain expert, and they will get that practice of doing the collaboration, of asking the questions, of paraphrasing, of summarizing, of doing the statistics, of explaining the statistics. Those are things that they get valuable experience by doing. After each collaboration, after each project, students then reflect We can have discussions. We have sometimes video coaching and feedback sessions where we record meetings and we talk about that. That's reflection. That's really helpful for learning. And the final step for how to teach effectively is to provide mentoring opportunities for our students. So in LISA, I have usually senior students are paired with junior students in meetings. And so the junior students are learning from the senior students. And those senior students, they have a great experience mentoring, right? So people have talked about how we don't really learn something until we teach it. And so my students actually get experience teaching collaboration skills to other students, to their peers, and to junior students. So this all is kind of expert advice from me. And so your challenge then as a reader, as a watcher of this talk, is to then make it your own. And you must teach from your own experience. So now I want to talk about, like, how do we get that experience? I think we have a statistician, and with education, training, mentoring, and support, that statistician can become a collaborative statistician and data scientist. And a collaborative statistician is a really powerful person, because they can work with researchers at their institution to enable and accelerate research in many different projects. So many different people can gain from the advice and work of a collaborative statistician. Collaborative statisticians also work outside of academia. They can help governments make better decisions. They can support local NGOs to make data-driven decisions, and they can support business and industry. So that's what an individual collaborative statistician can do. Even better is the next step, which is for that individual to create a stat lab. And that stat lab can be an engine for educating students, educating really the next generation of collaborative statisticians, providing them training, providing them mentoring, and in a networked model, the stat labs can support other labs, and we can learn from each other. We can learn from the commonalities and differences from each other. So I have another slide on this, but the idea of the stat lab is that the stat labs educate and train the next generation. They serve as research infrastructure for their institution. So many people need statistics help. They need data science expertise, and the stat lab can be that place, that physical location for where people can go to get help. Stat labs also can teach short courses and workshops to improve statistical skills and data literacy. And what these stat labs do is that they produce collaborative statisticians. So our students become these really high-powered collaborative statisticians. And we have then data-capable development actors that we're working with that are gaining their own skills. They're building their own capacity to use statistics and do statistics in their work. And so from the stat lab, we can enable and accelerate research, help governments make better decisions, support local NGOs, and support businesses and industry in creating sustainable jobs. I think that stat labs, the statistical and data science collaboration laboratories, are engines for development. So we create a stat lab, we train collaborative statisticians and data-capable development actors, and then together we can impact, hundreds, thousands, millions, billions of people. So one more thing about the stat labs, specifically, every stat lab that's in my network, and I'll talk about the LISA 2020 in just a few moments, there are three missions for stat labs. The first is to train statisticians and data scientists to become effective interdisciplinary collaborators who can move between theory and practice. So they're comfortable with statistical theory, but they've moved out of just doing theorems and proofs to actually applying in practice, applying these theory and methods on applications to benefit society. The second thing about a stat lab, the second mission for a stat lab, is to create that space for collaboration. So it's infrastructure at the institution where domain experts can come in. They know they can come into the stat lab, and it's there where we can transform academic evidence into action. So our goal really is to transform that data into action that leads to sustainable development. The third mission is to teach short courses and workshops to improve statistical and data science skills and literacy widely throughout the community. So stat labs then provide excellent opportunities for what I was talking about earlier, for figuring out what to teach and how to teach it effectively. Because by collaborating with domain experts, when we work on projects, help them solve problems, help them make data-driven decisions, all of that helps us learn what to teach. So for example, there have been a lot of projects in LISA recently that have come up, and it's all about causal inference, that the researchers we're working with, they realize that they're always trying to ask a causal question. Does this cause this? And the traditional old style statistics, when we're just talking about correlations, we couldn't really talk about causality. And yet that's what the domain experts want. And so this basically is a signal that we need to teach ourselves, we need to teach our students causal inference. So, another example is I traveled in Tanzania and talked with some professors in animal science, and they were a little bit chagrined and embarrassed that he didn't know logistic regression. He knew that he should use logistic regression, but he just continued to use regular regression when he had a binary outcome, because that's what he knew. And he was really embarrassed that his students were continuing to do that because he didn't know logistic regression. And so that's, a really easy example that, okay, we need to teach logistic regression. So the point really is that there's so many topics for statisticians to learn. And how do we know what to teach? Well, we know what to teach because we can know what's useful for solving the types of projects and problems that come into our stat lab. And then how to teach it effectively? Well, when we're collaborating with researchers and businesses and policymakers and our students, when we're explaining statistics, that's part of collaboration, we can learn, what works best for us on how to teach it effectively, because we do it over and over. We explain statistics in many ways until it works. And so it's this experience that we get in collaboration that can help us become better teachers and teach the important things more effectively. So now I'm going to transition to the second to last topic of today's talk on the LISA 2020 network. So our vision is to build statistical analysis and data science capacity to transform evidence into action. And our goal way back 9 years ago was to create a network of 20 stat labs in developing countries by the year 2020, specifically by last October 20th, which was the International World Statistics Day, World Statistics Day. So we wanted 20 labs in developing countries by last October. So the LISA 2020 network is, we've built it up. We have 30 full members right now. There's another member, 31st member, that's going up for a vote currently. And then we have 17 other stat labs that are in a transitional phase or proposed phase, and so may eventually become full members in the LISA 2020 network. But the key thing about the network, and this is sort of related to, to the experts flying in, flying out, but also learning from each other, is that what works in the USA might work in Ethiopia, it might work in India, it might work in Ghana and Brazil and Nigeria and South Africa and Tanzania, Kenya, and Egypt and Pakistan. And many things will work and many things won't work. But so what we've done in the network is laid out the basic framework that works all over the world. And I've talked about that as having those three missions of training the next generation, serving as research infrastructure to collaborate with the domain experts to transform evidence into action, and then teaching short courses and workshops. So that basic structure works in every country. But then what works in Ghana, probably is going to work in Nigeria. And so we've formed connections between our stat labs, and our stat labs are learning from each other. So there are collaborations between India and Nigeria, between India and Ghana. We have more collaborations between the various countries and the various stat labs in our network. And that's especially relevant because we know that definitely what works in Nigeria almost certainly works throughout Nigeria. Yes, there are like some small differences, but the basic model is the same. And so we have Nigerian labs communicating with each other and sharing best practices with each other, within regions in Nigeria. And so that's one of the benefits then of the LISA 2020 network is that we can learn from each other. What works in one place, we can then adapt to our own situation. So everything must be adapted to the local context. It all must be internalized and made to be our own. And so just here's the number. We have 30 stat labs, full member at the moment. So we did it. We achieved our goal. We achieved our goal by more than 40%, by exactly 40%. We had 28 labs as of October 20th, 2020. And now we have 30, and probably by this time next year, we'll have 35 or maybe even 40 labs that are full member labs in our network. Okay. One final topic, and that's that data-driven development requires 4 elements. And the punchline is that I think we can use this model to improve the way that we are teaching statistics and like what we're teaching, and that we can build capacity. We can build statistics capacity and statistics education and practice by focusing on having stat labs working on data-driven development issues. So data-driven development requires 4 elements. There absolutely must be domain expertise that is, a policymaker is asking the right question. They're asking good questions. The researcher has relevant questions from their research expertise. And that's the basis of data-driven development. So it requires 4 elements. Domain expertise is one. And then there's the production or collection of data. There's the analysis of the data. And then there's making decisions based on the data. So statistics can enable and accelerate capacity in all of these areas, specifically in the intersections of data-driven development. And what I mean is that statisticians can be working with the data producers to produce better data. And if those data producers are also data decision makers, then if you are working with these data producers and data decision makers and applying your statistics, you're going to be in this sweet spot of the 3-way intersection that will really drive and help data-driven development. So if we focus on working in the intersections of data-driven development, we'll have the most impact. If we actually help a researcher collect better data, we're going to have more impact as statisticians than if we just wait and analyze poor quality data. Or if we collaborate with data decision makers and help them analyze data to make decisions and implement policies, we're going to have a much more impact than if we just analyze some data and make a recommendation but never see it followed through and never really collaborate with those data decision makers to see those decisions implemented. So by working in the intersections, we're going to have the most impact. And if we focus on teaching in the intersections of data-driven development, then our students will learn the most important things. So thinking about just statistics, a major component of statistics is data analysis. So this is something that our students just have to learn, not necessarily in any of the intersections, but they need to know the theory and methods of statistics. They need to know computation, modern topics like machine learning, and of course, applications. If somebody just has theoretical knowledge, they're not very useful because they have to apply it to have that impact. In terms of data production, I think this is a great opportunity for stat labs to contribute to statistics education. One example that's happening right now is that we have a stat lab in Nigeria at Obafemi Olawale University, and they are doing a project on assessing the infrastructure needs of a community within their city. And so they're having a workshop right now about collecting data in fragile environments. So it's a post-conflict region of the city that they're working in. And so, this is an example where students are going to be learning survey design and analysis, by working on producing and collecting data. So when we collaborate with the data producers, we realize that we need ourselves and we need our students to understand design of experiments, causal inference, survey design and analysis, and then our students can actually get practice in data collection. And that's really a great experience for when they're analyzing data later. And for the data decision makers, when we are working in the intersections with them, we realize that the topics that are super important are data visualization, the data acumen, that's kind of the intuition about data. So by actually working with producers of data and the users of data, our students can learn more methods for becoming better at getting data acumen. Working with these policymakers, data decision makers, students can learn about the use and abuse of statistics, about now modern artificial intelligence algorithms that might be, unbalanced because there's bad data in, bad decisions out. And so that can be a really touch point for important topics for our students to learn the use and abuse of statistics. And then similarly, critiquing data-driven arguments and then making good data-driven arguments. That's what the data decision makers really have to do. They have to make good arguments to be able to implement policies. And by working with these data decision makers, our students themselves learn these valuable skills. By doing all of this as well, by collaborating with the data producers and the data decision makers, our students can then learn these key collaboration skills of attitude, structure, content, communication, and relationship. So here's my final slide. Basically, in conclusion, I really encourage everybody to create and sustain a stat lab. Then to connect with the LISA 2020 network, and then use the experience in the stat lab to learn what statistics to teach and how to teach it. So thank you very much. I look forward to hearing somehow in the offline comments or questions. I'll be able to be responsive, but you can connect with the LISA 2020 network by visiting the lisa2020.org website, learning more about the network, and then by emailing lisa2020@colorado.edu. So thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kim Love, and I'm the Performance Monitoring Specialist for the LISA 2020 Network of Statistical Laboratories. In this talk, I'm going to discuss performance evaluation for a large and diverse group of statistical collaboration laboratories in developing countries spanning across Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America. I'll also provide some initial results from a survey asking the labs about the challenges and opportunities they are experiencing. If you've not already viewed Eric Vance's talk, which is part of this same session, please take the time to do that. He's provided some background about the LISA 2020 network, including an explanation of the purpose of statistical collaboration laboratories and the greater context for creating a network of these laboratories in developing countries. I'm going to start with an overview of the activities of the labs in the network and provide a description of the metrics we collect to measure the immediate outputs of these activities. Next, I'll talk about the techniques we've developed to ensure that data collection is straightforward for all labs individually and can also take place at a large scale. I'll review the achievements of the network with regard to the outputs we've discussed. Finally, I'll end by providing a brief overview of the results of a survey given to LISA 2020 Network lab representatives asking about the challenges and opportunities they recognize in their countries as statistical practitioners and collaborators. There are three primary activity types that LISA 2020 Network stat labs participate in. Those are training, collaboration, and education. Although we collect other metrics for longer-term outcomes, for this presentation we're going to focus on the metrics we collect that directly measure the outputs of these activities. Training refers to training students and staff in data-related disciplines, such as statistics and data science, to become collaborators. This does not refer to training them in general statistical theory or methods, which they have existing exposure to. Although methods of training vary from one lab to the next, there are some common methods used throughout the network. Those include attending collaboration-focused university courses, attending special collaboration training sessions, participating in video feedback and coaching, taking part in collaborative activities in stat lab projects, and attending stat lab meetings about collaborative activities. Collaboration refers to working with domain experts, researchers, business people, policymakers, and others with non-statistical expertise to help answer questions with data. There are many forms that collaboration can take. For example, collaborations can be long-term or short-term, and they can consist of one or many meetings along the way. Collaboration can take place in person or online. Collaboration may or may not involve funding. Sometimes we have the impression that in order for something to count, there has to be funding involved, and that's not necessarily true. Collaboration may or may not result in publications. Finally, collaboration could result in analyses and reports, or just simple advice. Finally, education refers to teaching statistics and data science, including concepts, methods, and greater data literacy to non-statisticians. The LISA 2020 network does this through workshops and short courses, which we classify in different ways. Those are short courses, which are usually just a few hours, one-day workshops, which last for an entire 8-hour day, and multi-day workshops, which take place over a series of days. The topics for these events can include software, specific statistics or data science methods, specialized methods for individuals in certain fields, and many other possible topics. Of course, being able to keep track of and evaluate the successes of the labs is very important for the future of the LISA 2020 network. It can also be overwhelming to manage the monitoring and evaluation process for a large and varying group of individual organizations. Each lab continuously tracks their own metrics, and we collect them centrally once per quarter or every 3 months. There are several steps we've taken since we initially began collecting metrics to help with the process. One is to make sure that the process of collecting metrics is integrated into each lab's regular administrative activities. We do this by requiring the first period of metric collection prior to each lab becoming a full member of the LISA 2020 network. In other words, they have to go through the process of collecting metrics at least once prior to complete recognition. Next, we ensure as much standardization as possible across the network. Each lab receives the same explanation of the metrics through materials that we've created, including a written guide and 15-minute video explaining the specific numbers and information we're interested in. Finally, we do provide some personal support for each lab. Each lab has an individualized spreadsheet tracking their own metrics. I communicate with each lab and review each lab's metrics individually when I ask them to report each quarter. This does take some time, but the amount of time is mitigated through the previously mentioned resources, and personal communication emphasizes the continued importance of each lab's unique contributions. I'd now like to share some of the achievements of the network related to these outcomes since January 2019 through March of this year, when we began to collect those metrics. This gives us a total of 197 lab quarters, as labs have continued to join the network over that time period. Each lab has reported up to 9 quarters of data. Some labs have joined more recently, and a few have only reported 1 quarter of data. Note that metrics include general numbers related to the outcomes I've already discussed, as well as divisions by male and female where appropriate in order to evaluate gender equality, an important consideration in many of the countries where LISA labs are located. First, with respect to training, a total of 888 students, both undergraduate and postgraduate, have been trained to be statistical collaborators. That's a huge number of students to have been trained in the last 2 years, and their training will continue to have impacts even after they leave their universities. Note this is 347 female students and 541 male students. The labs are training an average of 1.76 female students per quarter and an average of 2.75 male students per quarter. Note that overall 39.1% of the students trained are female. At individual universities, the percentage of students trained who are female ranges from 7.1% to 100%. The 100% comes from a women's university where only female students are taught. Among our co-ed institutions, the greatest percentage of female students trained is 86.4%. With respect to collaboration, there have been a total of 752 stat lab projects recorded since January 2019. This is an average of 3.86 projects per quarter per lab. However, this number varies greatly across the labs, where averages range from 0 to 60.5 projects per quarter. Some labs are not currently set up to perform these collaborations, and we'll continue working with them to ensure they can participate in all of the LISA Stat Lab activities. Finally, with regard to education of non-statisticians, our labs have taught 70 short courses, 59 one-day workshops, and 95 multi-day workshops. We've had 1,581 short course attendees, 2,601 one-day workshop attendees, and 4,845 multi-day workshop attendees. Again, this is an extremely large number of people who have been impacted by this education in just the past 2 years. We are quite proud of the achievements of the LISA 2020 network, and we will continue to collect metrics, both these outputs that I've just shared and longer-term outcomes, and we'll use these to continue to learn and to increase the impacts of the network. Before ending this presentation, I would like to pivot slightly and take the opportunity to report some initial results from a survey given to personnel representing the LISA 2020 network stat labs. There were 3 specific areas of interest in this survey: ways to improve statistical practice, ways to improve statistical collaboration, and areas requiring improvement or development to advance statistical practice and collaboration. Before we continue, please note that this is not a random sample of a larger group in any way. There were 36 responses from individuals representing stat labs. Note that more than one representative could respond per stat lab. This chart shows the distribution of the countries where the respondents work. As you can see, at least one country is very highly represented. Like the current composition of the labs, the responses lean heavily toward Nigeria. First, a number of potential ways to improve statistical practice were presented to the respondents, and they were asked to rate their agreement with whether this would improve statistical practice on a 5-point scale. I've provided a bar chart showing the percentage who strongly agreed with each way of improving statistical practice. Over 60% responded strongly agreed to every item, but the highest rated ways of improving statistical practice were strengthening access to computing resources and increasing overall statistical literacy within society. Next, a number of potential ways to increase statistical collaboration specifically, not general statistical practice, were presented to the respondents, and they were again asked to rate their agreement with whether this would improve statistical collaboration on a 5-point scale. I've provided a bar chart showing the percentage who strongly agreed with each way of improving statistical collaboration. Over 80% responded strongly agree to every item, showing all are considered to be quite important. The highest rated ways of improving statistical collaboration were increasing research funding for statistical collaboration and expanding training in statistical collaboration. Next, a number of general areas requiring improvement or development in order to advance statistical practice and collaboration were presented to the respondents. Respondents were asked to rate whether each had no or little need for improvement, a moderate need for improvement, or a significant need for improvement. The percentage responding with significant need to each item is presented in this graph. The two highest rated responses were education and training in statistical computing and more opportunities to practice collaborative statistics. Finally, there were some open-ended questions provided on the survey, and I've summarized some of the themes that were not specifically emphasized through the earlier results on the previous slides. One point that was made several times was that more emphasis should be placed on nuanced and proper statistical analyses among domain experts. A related point was made that this implies we need to create trust and relationships between statisticians and those domain experts. We also received feedback that general awareness of the availability of statistical collaboration should be increased. The issue may not be whether or not access is available, but whether domain experts recognize that access to statistical collaboration. Finally, a number of respondents indicated that bureaucracy can greatly complicate all of these issues. So that will end this talk. I've appreciated the opportunity to share this information with you. I've provided some contact information on this final slide. The web address for the LISA 2020 network is provided if you'd like to learn more about it. I've also provided my own contact information. In addition to serving as the program monitoring specialist for the LISA 2020 network, I'm also a private statistical collaborator at KR Love Quantitative Consulting and Collaboration. Finally, I've provided a link to the PowerPoint for this presentation in case you'd like to retain a copy. Thank you again for joining me.